Okay, so before we learn a little bit about the Rebbe's discourse on Simchas Torah from 1978, just want to share a few thoughts on Simchas Torah. This is from Rabbi Zellickson's excellent Hilchos Chad B'Chad, gathering of basic thoughts of Hasidic thoughts about Simchas Torah, about every holiday. And first of all, tomorrow night on Simchas Torah, when we say Shechiyanu, the Shechiyanu is on the Torah. We're saying Shechiyanu for the Torah, not just for the holiday, but Shechiyanu because of the Torah itself. The source for Hakafes, the dancing on the Torah, it's known about the written Torah and the oral Torah that in the written Torah, there's an emphasis on the letters of the Torah and the way they're combined. And therefore, every letter is exact. There can't be an extra letter. There can't be one letter less, one more. The oral Torah is connected more with Chachma, with the wisdom of Hashem. And therefore, the letters aren't as important, rather the idea that is conveyed through those letters. And that's why, as we learned yesterday, the wine libations are written clearly in the Torah, but the water libations aren't written in the Torah. It's only a law that Moshe Rabbeinu received on Mount Sinai. And that's because the water libations are from the level of Hashem's wisdom that cannot be written down in the written Torah so that it should be expressed in words. So similarly, the dancing with the Torah, Shmini Atzeres, was not written in the written Torah or even in the oral Torah. It wasn't even told directly to Moshe Rabbeinu at Mount Sinai. It's only a custom. The reason why it's only a custom is because the hakafis, the word hakafa comes from the word a circle, and it's connected to something which transcends the level of Hashem's wisdom, and therefore cannot be written down even in the level of the oral Torah, because the oral Torah is the lights of Hashem which have vessels. But the hakafes, dancing the Torah, transcends vessels. Another point about the joy that we experience on Simchas Torah is that Simchas Torah also means the joy that we give the Torah. We draw down God's essence into the Torah, and that is what causes the Torah to rejoice. The ones who are able to cause the Torah to rejoice are the Jewish souls. They are the ones who are able to bring down God's infinite light in the Torah. And this is a result of the efforts that we make on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we connect to Hashem from the very essence of the neshama. We accept upon ourselves Hashem's sovereignty in a very deep way from the essence of the neshama. And through this, we're able to draw down God's essence into the Torah. And how do we actually cause the Torah to rejoice? This is achieved by dancing around the bima. In the Torah itself, there are two elements. There is the essence of Torah, the actual Torah, which is written with ink on parchment. That's the Torah itself. Then there is the reading of the Torah. That's the expression of Torah. That's the revelation of Torah. On Simchas Torah, we are makif, etzem of Torah. We are connected to the essence of Torah, the letters, the parchment of the Torah, and we go around the bima which we read the Torah. It means there's something very physical about the Torah itself. It's letters, it's ink, and the Zohar says that there is a Asil Eila. That which looks to us as the lowest really has the highest source. So on Simchas Torah, we go around the bima, meaning we're going beyond the expression of Torah, and we're connected to instead the essence of Torah. there is a specific nuance to our joy with the Torah. The custom is to rejoice with the Torah in a very specific way. We take the Sefer Torah, the way it is dressed in its mantle, and we dance around the bima, and that's how it happens. So the Rebbe asks, seemingly you would think the Torah is about intelligence. So the joy of Simchas Torah would seem to have been more naturally connected to studying the Torah, adding in quantity, adding in quality in our learning of Torah. Why do we specifically express our joy in the Torah with dancing with our feet? And further, why do we celebrate the Torah the way the Torah is dressed and covered in a way that you can't even read it? The explanation of this is the truth of Torah, what Torah really is not intelligence, rather it's the holiness of the Torah. And since the Torah has to permeate us in an internal way, in order that it shouldn't just remain hovering over us, so we have to understand it too. But the truth of Torah is beyond understanding. Hashem wants that the truth of Torah should permeate us. Well, what is Torah? Torah is holiness. Through understanding the Torah, we bring into ourselves internally the essence of Torah. And that connects the essence of our neshama with the essence of Torah, which is beyond logic. So our connection to Torah comes from the essence of our neshama, which is connected to the essence of Torah. In order to absorb that internally, you have to also understand the Torah. And that's the reason why on Simchas Torah, we dance to the Torah the way it's specifically dressed with its mantle. This expresses how we're relating to the way the Torah is beyond logic. And that is what we're bringing joy to. The simcha is not with the logic of Torah, rather with the idea is that through the learning and reading the Torah, we're getting God's essence. It's not about the understanding of it. It's about the essence of Hashem, which is present in the Torah. And that's the reason why the joy is expressed specifically by dancing with our feet, because the feet, and our feet specifically, there's expression of essence. In short, when something touches your very core, when you're very, very happy, you don't just smile, you don't just sing. You know something has touched your very core when it expresses itself in every facet of your being, even the lowest, the most nethermost parts of yourself are affected when something has touched your core. So because the Simchas Torah connects the essence of the neshama with the essence of Hashem, therefore it expresses itself even in our feet. Also, in the parallel to feet in our service of Hashem, in our soul, is our faith in Hashem. So in our faith in Hashem, there's also an expression of the essence of the soul, as we learned yesterday. Here's another point that the previous Rebbe said in the name of his father, Rabbi Rashab. He said, the 48 hours of Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, you have to really consider it to be very precious. You have to cherish them. Every single moment, you're able to draw down treasures with barrels of both physical and spiritual blessing. And how do you draw down these treasures and bring these barrels down? This is through dancing. The previous Rebbe writes, I got your attention, David, with that one. Yes, the way we draw every moment of Simchas Torah you have to cherish, because you're able to draw down barrels and buckets of blessing. And how do you do that? Through dancing. Okay, the previous Rebbe writes, the idea of previous Rebbe writes, the idea of singing and dancing on Simchas Torah is the idea that a person knows that he has to elevate himself. He has to be higher. And even someone who's in a lofty level has to go even higher. That's the theme of the dancing. We have to get higher. here are a few statements of our Rebbe's about Simchas Torah. The previous Rebbe writes, on Simchas Torah, Hashem forcibly takes away the whole concept of ayin hara. The ayin hara, that God forbids that when someone's jealous of someone or they can cause harm. So on Simchas Torah, the whole concept of the evil eye is taken away. On Simchas Torah, God's blessing to the Jewish people is revealed openly, and with the joy of Torah, we're able to draw down abundance for the Jewish people in general, and especially for those who are involved in Torah and service of Hashem. The Rebbe writes, on Simchas Torah, and the previous Rebbe, on Simchas Torah, the doors are opened. At that time, the gates of light, the gates of blessing, the gates of success, all the gates are open, and we are able to connect to all of this and through the Torah. Okay, that is those are a few teachings of our Rebbe's about Simchas Torah. There's a few things about things that our Rebbeim did at Simchas Torah. The Tzemach Tzedek danced so much at Simchas Torah that none of the younger Hasidim were able to keep up with him. And the Tzemach Tzedek announced while he was dancing, Jews dance with the joy of Torah, and with the merit of dancing with the Torah, you will merit to have health, children, and comfortable livelihood. The Mittler Rebbe said about the Tzemach Tzedek that he experienced Simchas Torah the way it was in the Beis HaMikdash. The Rebbe, in the lifetime of the previous Rebbe, would dance with the Hasidim all night long, literally until the morning, until in the wee hours in the morning, the Rebbe would look would try to find some to dance with, I guess, because everyone had already gone to sleep. Okay, that's a few ideas about Simchas Torah from our Rebbe's, and now I'm going to try to convey a discourse of the Rebbe that was said in 1978. To understand the idea of Simchas Torah, it's known the question about this: why is the joy of the Torah done specifically by taking the Sefer Torah the way it is wrapped in its mantle and dancing with us? Because it's known about the Torah is called your wisdom and your understanding. And yet the way we celebrate with the Torah is not through learning deeply, rather through dancing. And therefore this joy is by all the Jewish people, even by the most simple people, which are unable to understand the Torah. And even more, that by the joy and the dancing, we see that all people who all year, you don't see the connection with the Torah, they all join, they all celebrate the Torah on Simchas Torah, as we see clearly. And this idea that the Simcha of Simchas Torah is by every single Jew is expressed in the fact that we dance with the Sefer Torah. We dance with the written Torah. Because even someone who does not know what is written in the Torah is able to see the blessings in the Torah. And since the Torah itself commands, and Torah is true, the Torah commands us to say the blessing on the Torah, it's understood this is the reality. That even someone who does not know what the words of the Torah mean, is able to draw down the infinite light of Hashem until the very essence of God in the Torah that he studies. It's also known the question, why do we make Simchas Torah on Shmini Atzeres, or outside of Israel? On the second day of Shmini Atzeres, seemingly the day that we should rejoice with the Torah would seem to be more appropriate on the day that God gave us the Torah. So to understand this, the explanation is brought from the Medrash. The Medrash says that it would have been appropriate to have the last days of Sukkot to be delayed 50 days, just like the day of Shavuos is delayed 50 days after Pesach. But the reason why it isn't, the Medrash gives a parable of a king that had many daughters. He had some daughters who were married to people who lived close by, and some daughters who married to people who lived farther away. And one day, all the daughters of the king came to see the king, and the king said, the daughters who live close by, they have the ability to travel back and forth. But those who live farther away, since we're going now from the summer to the winter and the roads are going to get harder to travel in, they don't have time to go back and forth. And since everyone's here already, let's make a holiday together. So too, on Shavuos, since it's going from that time is summertime, so it's possible to go back and forth. Therefore, the Torah says, after Passover, go home and come back again for Shavuos. But on Shmini Atzeres, Hashem says there's not enough time to go back and forth. Since everyone's here, let's go and celebrate. And that's the reason why we make Simchas Torah on Shmini Atzeres, because the one day the daughters of the king come to see their father, the king. The daughters refer to the souls of Israel, who are called the daughters of Jerusalem. They come to see their father. When did they come to see their father and to greet their father? On Yom Kippur. And so Hashem says, let's make one day to celebrate. That means that corresponding to the one day of Yom Kippur, there is the one day of Simchas Torah. To understand this, we have to first explain another concept, and that is as follows. All the holidays of the month of Tishrei are connected to that God's oneness. Concerning Rosh Hashanah, the Torah says, in midst of the days of the shofar. That means that the day of Rosh Hashanah is different than all their holidays in one mitzvah, the mitzvah of the shofar. And concerning this mitzvah, Maimonides says that this is a mitzvah which is beyond logic and reason. And although the mitzvah of shofar has many lofty things in there, like the mitzvah of tshuva, as the Maimonides says that the shofar alludes to the fact that we have to wake up and return to God, but nevertheless, the essence of the mitzvah of shofar is a decree of God and beyond logic and reason. And so too regarding Yom Kippur, which is a conclusion of the 10 days of tshuva, it is in the level of God's oneness in every area, in time, in space, and in energy. This unique service of Hashem on Yom Kippur is in the Holy of Holies, which is the place of the expression of God's oneness in space. And it is the day of Yom Kippur, which is called in the Torah the one day of the year. It's expression of God's oneness in time. And so too, it is who does that service, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who does this as the emissary of the Jewish people. And concerning him, the Torah says that he is separate and holier. Then he is a holy of holies. Of all the Jewish people, he is a level of the oneness of Hashem in soul. So that we see the idea of God's oneness in every facet of Yom Kippur and in Rosh Hashanah, and so too regarding Sukkot. Regarding the mitzvah of Sukkah, which we see that the mitzvah of Sukkah encompasses all 7 days of Sukkah from the very first moment. We see the idea of God's oneness because it says in the Talmud that all the Jewish people can sit in one Sukkah, and so too regarding the mitzvah of the 4 species, that the purpose of the mitzvah of the 4 species is to draw God's oneness down internally. In each of the 4 species, we see God's oneness. We see this especially in the Esrog. In the Esrog, we see this more. And that's why when the Torah lists the 4 species, it lists the Esrog first. And that's why the Torah says specifically about the Esrog, that it's called a beautiful fruit. And that is because the Esrog the Esrog is produced by being in the tree an entire year. That means it is able to withstand all the different 4 climates of the year. And not only is it able to withstand the 4 climates of the year, but it grows from those 4 climates. So it causes a unity in all different parts of the year. And from the unity of the Esrog, this causes unity in all the other 3 species. And therefore, the Torah's words about the Esrog being beautiful also applies to all the other 3 species as well. So in addition to the fact that each of the 4 species represents the idea of unity, the mitzvah is to take all 4 species together, which represent the 4 kinds of the Jewish people, that they should all be united together to do the will of Hashem. So in order for there to be a true unity, and that it shall last, in all the 4 kinds of Jews, this is achieved. How do we achieve this unity? This is achieved through tshuva. Regarding tshuva, it says tshuva is beyond all division. And that's why tshuva could be done in one moment. And that's the difference between the first tablets and the second tablets. The first tablets are Torah, pure Torah. The second tablets are Torah that you would get through tshuva. In order to get the second tablets, Moses had to be on the mountain for 40 days. In addition to the preparation of the 7 weeks before he got the first tablets, but by the second tablets, the main purpose of Moses being in the mountain for 40 days was in order to cause God to be appeased to the Jewish people with joy and a full heart. That's why Moses was on the mountain. But it didn't take 40 days to get the first tablets. Moses had to learn them. He had to be there for 40 days to absorb them. The second tablets were given in a moment. The 40 days prior were just to appease Hashem. But once Hashem was appeased, it was a moment that God gave us the second tablets. That's just like Tshuva is done in one moment. So too the gift of the second tablets was also a gift of one moment. So this expresses the fact that Tshuva could be done in one moment, expresses how Tshuva is beyond all limitations and all measurements. Because Tshuva reaches in ourselves the deepest part of the soul. And this level of the soul is beyond division. It's the oneness of the soul, just like the Zohar says that Tshuva can be done in one moment, in 1 hour. And that's why Tshuva achieves unity among all the Jewish people, from the heads of the tribes until the wood choppers and water carriers, in a way that all the Jewish people are able to stand together and to stand strong like kings, and all the Jewish people become kings, and they become the masters of the existence of the world. And this begins by them being written and sealed for good and a good sweet year, an open and clear way in this physical world, lower than 10 tefachim, down in this physical world, in their physical parts of their life, in material parts of their life. And since at this level that we're talking about, there is no distinction between the spiritual and the physical, and between higher and lower. Therefore, they are able to draw down the blessing of Hashem and to draw it down through the spiritual cosmos, and also that which is beyond the spiritual cosmos. And that's the meaning of the one day when the daughters of the king come to see the king, and the king said, "Let's make a holiday and celebrate together." The one day that the Jewish people, that the souls of Israel come to celebrate with their father is Yom Kippur. The one day of the year, one in time, one in space, one in soul, and this continues and creates the day of the one celebration of Simchas Torah, which is also called one day. So this inspiration of the deepest part of the soul, which is beyond division, has to permeate the other parts of the soul, which are in the realm of division. Just like any inspiration that you have has to be connected to a physical action, like sitting in the sukkah and taking the 4 species and dancing with your feet. And that's the reason why, after the Torah says you're all standing here together, that the Jewish people are all connected and they're all one because of the essence of the Jewish people. The Torah then says, but there's wood choppers, there's wood water carriers. After the Torah highlights our oneness, how it's beyond division, the Torah then continues and says and draws attention to the fact the way they were divided. That's because we have to draw down this oneness in a way to down to the present and the down to earth ways, the way we are individuals. And just like this is in soul, that we have to draw down the oneness of the soul into the here and now, so too is this in the year, that from the one day of Yom Kippur and the one day of Simchas Torah, that has to affect and lead and impact all days of the year, starting from the day after Simchas Torah, and every single detail of what a Jew does. It should be recognized in the Jew that he just arrived from the one day of Yom Kippur and the one day of Simchas Torah. And this has to permeate the entire year. That although many weeks and months have passed from Yom Kippur and Simchas Torah, nevertheless, the inspiration of that one day is not weakened, and it stands with its full power because it comes from a level beyond division and beyond change. It comes from Hashem himself, when Hashem says about himself, "I am Hashem, who haven't changed." And through the power of the one day, which is beyond division, this permeates all the days of the year, all their changes and all of their divisions. And through this causes an elevation in the one day itself, just like we said about the Esther doesn't only withstand the 4 seasons, but it grows from them. So too, the inspiration of Yom Kippur, when it permeates the rest of the year, that causes that elevates the inspiration of Yom Kippur. May be Hashem's will that all the above should be fulfilled in every single one of us, among all the Jewish people. That should be a blessed year, an open and clear way, down in this world lower than 10 tefachim, in children and health and in abundant parnasa, abundance in all areas, both in the simple sense, to have actual children and health and parnasa, and also in the spiritual sense of having spiritual children, spiritual health, and spiritual parnasa, because our physical lives derive from our spiritual lives, and with joy and gladness of heart, we should go from the joy of Simchas Torah to, as the Torah says, Jacob went on his path That means after all the holiday season, we have to go down into our own path into the mundane. As the idea of Jacob going on his path begins after Yom Kippur, doing the mitzvahs after Yom Kippur. As it says in the Talmud, after Yom Kippur, every Jew is involved in doing mitzvahs. And after Simchas Torah, it's not going from Yom Kippur to doing mitzvahs, it's going from the joy of Simchas Torah to the mundane things. So every single day, both during the days of the week, how much more so on Shabbos and Yontif, Yom Kippur, it should be permeated. Everything should be permeated. Both are things which are more generic, more encompassing, I guess like faith in Hashem and love of Hashem, and more specific things. They all should be permeated with the essential point of the deepest and essence of the neshama, which is connected to the essence of Hashem. And you got to go, David. Here's the last point. And since we are coming from Simchas Torah, joy breaks all boundaries. Joy is beyond all limitations and boundaries. So this should break down the limitations, the boundaries of the inner exile within ourselves, and also the boundaries and limitations of the actual exile. And we should merit immediately mamish. Our eyes should see Hashem's return to Tzion, and the Shuka Plika Ulu Mashiach Sekenu. He should come and lead us upright to our land speedily in our days mamish, and build the Beis Hamikdash in its place and gather all the dispersed of Israel until all the nations of the world will be transformed to serve Hashem with one consent, and we will see God's sovereignty in the world. L'chaim. David, have a wonderful.
Amen. Amen.
Now we got our marching orders, man. We got our marching orders. We're there as long as we need to go.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Beautiful shir. A good yontif. Thank you, Rabbi. Bye-bye.
Don't 48 hours, man. Get the buckets and barrels. I'm going to call you afterwards to make sure.
48 hours? What do I do in the next 48 hours? What do you mean 48 hours?
During these 48 hours, you're able to get barrels and barrels of blessing through cherishing every moment with dancing. The dancing is what draws down barrels of blessing. You got it, David?
I got you, Rabbi. I got you. I already got the barrels, though. I already got the barrels, but I'm going to have to go get a few more barrels.
Need a lot more. We need to bring Mashiach.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi.